split squat. So in this particular split squat video, we're gonna talk about two things. One is gonna be facilitating a little bit of hip flexion on the forward leg. And the second one is getting some hip extension, or at least getting into neutral on the rear leg. So oftentimes what we'll see is when people are doing a split squat is they think that they're doing a split squat for a certain adaptation, and maybe their intention doesn't match their desired outcome, so then they don't get the adaptation that they want. So you got to be mindful of your position and your setup. So if we're talking about hip flexion on the lead leg, obviously starting without a front foot elevated is going to be the easiest place. So if someone's pretty load sensitive into hip flexion, maybe you're coming off of a hip surgery, you have some sort of impingement where you're sensitive coming into hip flexion, just starting over ground is going to be the best place. So I like to cue to where my feet are about hip width apart. If I want to increase my base of support, I get my feet just a little bit wider. If I want to work on getting more rotation into that hip joint, I put my feet a little bit more narrow, and then that'll also change like my balance because my center of mass is narrow. So going over ground, what my goal here is, again, hip flexion on the lead leg. So when I come down into this bottom position, I want to make sure that my torso is vertical, and from my shoulder to my knee on my rear leg is a straight line. And I want to do my best that I'm not translating way too far forward, because then I'm putting a bunch of load into my hip extensor on the lead leg, and I'm almost going through like a forward trunk bend versus true hip flexion. If that gets super easy, I can scale it by using the yoga block or a 45-pound bumper plate or like a 4-inch or a 6-inch step, and the same idea applies. We're working on hip flexion on the lead leg, keeping my hips square. I almost like to do a little bit of a pelvic tilt, and then when I drop to that bottom position, I want to make sure that my shoulder and my knee is in a straight line, and I'm coming into hip flexion on the lead leg, coming back out of it. If you need to shift out because your quads are getting tired, that's fine as you do reps. But the idea is you're not coming at this forward angle down into a split squat. We want to be nice and tall, go to that set position, drop to the ground, and I'm in a straight line from my shoulder to my knee, and I'm moving into hip flexion on that forward leg, or in this example, the right leg. And then hip extension is occurring on that back leg as well. Oftentimes, if I'm really working on creating hip flexion and I continue to elevate the forward leg, you'll really feel a good stretch or pull from the front of your hip bone down into your quad as the height of that front foot elevated increase, and that's okay. So it all depends on your adaptation, or what adaptation you're going after. Most of our intention with this particular split squat is going to be facilitation of pure hip flexion.